Hi, everyone. I wanted to do a little short lecture film. I didn't get a chance to get to a chapter on speaking with confidence that I'd like to just do a short-ish recording of and put that on Blackboard for you to reference. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint that is associated with it and just walk through some of the things that I covered in my other class that I didn't get to cover in our class. So something to remember that is a benefit to public speaking is that you have, ideally, and we have it in this class because we meet in person, the benefit of seeing your audience in front of you. That can also be the super terrifying part. But when you have your audience in front of you, you are able to see the reactions and to adjust or adapt your presentation according to what you're seeing. So in today's age, we also have audiences that can be virtual, as we did this week with Zoom. We know that sometimes it is conducting a presentation via Zoom to people you can or cannot see. It also might be people who are posting things on YouTube or other similar channels where there is an audience, but there's not a lot of interaction with them. But the idea is that you're delivering a message that is beneficial to both the audience and the speaker. Something to always remember is that public speaking, speaking up, speaking out is civic engagement. So it is our right in our democracy to be able to do that. And one of the benefits of a class like this is hopefully giving you the confidence to, if at some point in your life you need to stand up and speak out, you can do that. The other thing you want to remember is that being in this class is not just about you giving speeches, but it's about you being an attentive audience member for the speakers who are presenting. And we want to give our full attention and full respect to these speakers as they present. So as you are thinking about, again, public speaking, remember it is transactional. You have the speaker, you have the audience, and it's not just a one-way street. There is back and forth, even though some of that communication is nonverbal. One of the things to remember about your audience in a speech class, and something that I always have to remember, is that you are considered captive audience members. Do not get this confused with captivated. Captive is people who have to be there. You're not necessarily choosing to spend your 8:15 Monday morning in a speech class because you just really love it. You're doing it because it's a requirement of your program to graduate. So captive listeners are a little bit harder to reach. And going into a presentation knowing that is good because you always want to know as much as you can about your audience. Sometimes a speaker can have a really distracting delivery, whether it's really big, funky hair or a really loud outfit or just mannerisms, fidgeting that are distracting. And then the idea that all of us come into a classroom, into a presentation with things going on in our own lives. We might not have slept well the night before. We might have skipped breakfast. We might be worried about an exam in our next class. We might have a sick kid. There are things going on internally in all of us that we try to suspend for moments when we're listening to public speakers. But know that, if you look out at your audience member and you see somebody yawning, it doesn't mean that they're bored by you. It could, again, mean that they got 4 hours of sleep the night before. That isn't to say that we should, not be aware of what we're doing as audience members, that we should put our phones away, that we should set up, make eye contact. The other thing to keep in mind is that we're all coming from different cultural values. What is important to one person might not be important to another. What one person's strongest beliefs are might be completely antithetical or opposite to another person's. So keep those things in mind. These are all called noise, and these are all things that can prohibit or lessen your message from getting across. So as we speak, we just want to be aware that these things are happening and do our best to engage our audience. So in order to prepare yourself for public speaking, know who you are, what you like, what you enjoy. You're beginning to know your audience, your classmates, what they are interested in and maybe not interested in, and know your situation. Your situation is simply the layout of our room together. It's when you're speaking, it's how long you're speaking, it's whether you have a microphone or a podium. If you're ever asked to present somewhere that is not a place that you're acquainted with, so let's say you go to a conference and you have to present, I always recommend go scout it out before the presentation so you kind of know where everything is, you know how big the room is, you know how to use the computer system, because if you do it right before, you're going to be extra nervous. And I've had some situations where I did not get there in time and I was extra nervous. So knowing yourself includes you're doing a scan already in the class inventory of what you value, what you're good at, what you're curious about. Think about issues that you do find important. Know that there is this idea of a perceived ethos or credibility. Our ethos, our credibility is not our resume. It is how other people perceive us to be credible. So you can have a resume or a curriculum vitae that is 20 pages long. You could have published 16 books and given presentations all over the world. But if your audience doesn't connect with you or doesn't believe you, your credibility will be lower. The other thing to consider is that our credibility changes and it's different for each of us. So one day I might have a really great day of teaching and I might feel really good about it. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, that wasn't great. It happens to all of us. You know, again, we're all human. We're all going through different things, having different things outside of us happen. And that can affect how we present. And the idea of ethos or credibility can also differ from each of you. So what one person might deem a really fantastic presentation, another person in the same audience might be like, I didn't connect with it. So there's always that human variant or variability that goes into any public presentation. You can't win over everybody. You can't make everybody like you. That's a lesson that we have to learn when we're really, really young. So you might not connect as much to all your audience members, and that's okay. So you are starting to get to know your classmates, and hopefully that class inventory will help. I want you to strive to adapt to your audience. So as you see people who might look confused, that you can address an issue, maybe describe or give more examples of an issue, but don't pander to the audience, which just basically means don't give them what they want for the sake of pleasing them. If you are addressing a topic that is really important to you and you think should be really important to your audience, but it's been listed like an irritation, or people are like, that's boring, man, I don't want to hear it. That doesn't mean you have to change completely. It just means that you have to change the way you approach the topic. Understand reluctance if the message is unpopular. So if I go into a presentation and I know that I disagree with the stance and I have an idea of who the speaker is, know that that can happen when we get into persuasion, and depending on the topics that you choose, some of your audience might completely disagree with you. But our job is to listen respectfully, open-mindedly, and to try to hear out the other person's side. If you are presenting a piece of information or a topic that is controversial or not likely to be well received, be respectful in how you present that and have really good evidence. The situation, as I mentioned, is the setting. So you know where your classroom is, what it looks like, how big it is. We don't need a microphone in that room so we can hear everybody. The temporal context is the idea that worldviews change and that we want to know if there are changes happening that we might want to address in the world. And then again, think about the listener's world, what's happening to them, what might they be going through. It's not always about the message or you as a speaker. It's sometimes the listener comes into a presentation situation and it's just like, I can't focus. Also know what your purpose is. For your first speech, your purpose is to inform. So you're trying to present data, information in an objective as possible way. But when you get to persuasion, you're trying to sway, you're trying to influence. And that includes often a different style of approach, a little bit of more emotion, and a call to action of some sort. And then lastly, you'll do an entertaining speech, which is basically just meant to kind of uplift the mood, get people feeling good about the event, and bring people together. For this class, you're going to have a couple different styles of delivery. You already did on day one that somewhat impromptu speech where you didn't have a ton of time to prepare. That was your 6-word profile. We'll do a couple of these throughout the term, and I'll give you a little time to prepare, but it's good practice. These are sometimes also called like elevator pitches, like the 30 to 60-second pitch that you might make to somebody as you're riding the elevator up, that you want a job or you want a project or you want a promotion. Extemporaneous is what you'll do for speeches 1 and 2. This is just a fancy way of saying I'm speaking without a lot of notes. I'm not reading my presentation to the audience. I have notes in front of me, but I am still making good eye contact. I am being conversational. That's what you want to strive for. And then your last speech will be a manuscript speech. And that means that you will write it all out and you will be able to read it. But again, you don't want to just look down at your sheet of paper. You want to deliver with good eye contact, good energy, good tone. So we have started to talk about what your drafts should look like. And I linked for you on Blackboard under the week 1 assignments folder, a link to a formal outline template. This is also sometimes called a full sentence template or full sentence outline. And as you do in English composition or other communications courses, you want to have a predictable structure to your presentation that always entails an introduction, body, and conclusion. One of the disadvantages of public speaking is that we don't have the ability to go back and reread something. So when we're speaking, we need our sentences to be direct and simpler, and we need to repeat things quite a bit because, again, we don't have the advantage of going back, rereading, double checking. It's harder for audiences to follow when they're just hearing something, which is part of the reason why you also want to have visual aids often when you're presenting, because you can have kind of all those senses being hit at one time for your audience, which enriches the learning experience. And if our structure of our speech makes sense, we know what's coming, and we know in the end, we're reviewing what we detailed. There's a sense of reassurance or safety in that. We kind of, as humans, like predictability in some ways. We like structure. It's easier to pay attention and retain information if we know what to expect. So the introduction of your speech has a few special jobs, and that includes getting our attention. That might be asking a series of questions, telling a story, asking for audience interaction, like show of hands, who here has ever eaten a bug. So there's lots of techniques or strategies you can use to introduce a speech, but you want to pull us in right away. You might then also give us some of the reasons why you've chosen this particular topic. So in the example I posted on Blackboard on Poland brainstorming, I talked a little bit about how I took a trip to Poland. My husband is part Polish, and I find it to be a really interesting world, our country that's been really ambushed and overtaken over the centuries by lots of different countries and tribes, if you will. So telling us your connection to the topic. You might also try to relate to your audience members. You're starting to get to know each other. You might, find that some of you have the same major, some of you like the same movie or the same music. So being able to call out to your audience members is a way to kind of pull us in. And then you always want to preview for us in your intro what's coming. So today I will be sharing with you the history of Nazism, communism, and democracy in Poland so that we know what's coming. Your body is where most of your speech resides. It is where the main points are covered in more detail. If I'm thinking about a 5-minute speech, I'm usually thinking about an intro that's 30 to 60 seconds long, a body that's a couple minutes long, and then a conclusion that is maybe 30 to 45 seconds long. So most of the chunk of time is devoted to the body of your speech. And you connect your main points with transitions. So firstly, more importantly, conversely, in comparison, in contrast, finally, ultimately, you are giving us the ties to how everything goes together. I usually use transitions or write my transitions kind of as I'm perfecting the end of my speech. So if you are not great at transitions, that's something that you can do at the end. And then your conclusion has many of the same functions as your introduction. It is recapping your thesis, restating your main points, you're summarizing everything, and you let us know that we've come to the end. So sometimes I will see students who maybe haven't practiced enough get to the end of their speech and they'll go, so that's all I got. So you want to avoid that. You want to, again, go back to your intro, think about how did you start? Can you use a similar technique in your conclusion? Remind us of what we just heard about, and then leave us with some closing kind of feeling or thought. The structure of the speech, again, helps your audience remember, helps us keep up to know what's coming, and does help establish or reinforce your credibility. If we feel as though you're guiding us in a direction that makes sense and is clear, we're going to be more likely to follow along with you. Some of you have expressed some fear about public speaking, which is not at all uncommon. I cannot promise you that your fear will go away. I can certainly not promise you that it will go away in 7 weeks. This is one of those things that the more you do it, like a lot of things, the better you're going to get about it, and the easier it will be. I've been doing this for many years now, and I still have the back to school butterflies, and I still have that anxiety on the first day. And that, that's just a part of being a human and wanting to do well and wanting to get your message across clearly and to connect with your students and your audience members. The type of anxiety associated with public speaking is called apprehension, communication apprehension, and it's definitely a real thing. There are people who will avoid public speaking at all costs. My husband did work with some people when he was in internet technology, IT. When he was in IT, who were great employees, but when they were given the chance to advance, they knew they would have to lead more presentations and group meetings, and they didn't want to do that. It was too fearful for them. Many of us have this fear, and especially as we are getting into our professions, we're going to be a little bit more anxious about it than when we've been in it for a while. There's also the notion that we have unrealistic expectations of how we're going to perform. We expect ourselves to be this, like, I'm going to be the next wonderkind. I'm gonna be the amazing public speaker. And sometimes our delivery is not what we would like it to be. So try not to be too terribly hard on yourself. You are practicing these things, you're perfecting and getting better at these things. So if you're not super confident right out of the gate, that makes sense. I'm still learning how to do a lot of things in life, and the more I do them, the better I get. But that doesn't mean I'm an expert in many fields. We also fear what other people think of us. We are judgmental by nature, partly as a survival tactic. So we fear all of those eyes on us and that we're going to look silly or sound stupid. Natural, normal human fears. But again, remember, we are in this class together to support each other and learn and grow together. And we're all rooting for your success. We do not relish having any of our classmates fail or be embarrassed. And so, if you can think of it that way, if you can envision that it's going to go well, usually it will. There are definitely physiological things that happen when we're anxious. I know that I get sweatier, I get shakier, my stomach gets upset. Sometimes you have dry mouth. We tend to speak more quickly when we're nervous. We tend to maybe fidget a little bit more. And there's sometimes things that happen to our voices. I know that I can sometimes hear my own anxiety or fear in my voice when I'm speaking. And in severe cases, people will completely avoid it. We are often most anxious right before we speak, and then when the instructor gives us the assignment. So you've already cleared one of those hurdles, and you'll be anxious the day of your presentations. I find that usually I'm anxious for like the first minute when I'm presenting, and then my body kind of goes, okay, you're not going to die. Everything's going to be okay. When we do speak, as I mentioned, we tend to speak faster. We tend to maybe use verbal clutter, and we also don't make as much eye contact. So if you can, on your note cards, you can sometimes go like, look up, slow down, breathe. Please do know that you will probably feel more nervous than you look. Since I am going to record you, you'll be able to see it, but usually, even if you feel like you have fireworks going off in your body, we in the audience are not seeing that. And again, remember, we're all doing it together. So some ways to combat this include picking a topic that's of interest to you. If you pick it and are passionate about it, chances are the audience is also going to be. Prepare, do your research, write your draft, get the feedback, and be thorough in your research and writing. Practice a lot. And then PMA is positive mental attitude. I am not a Pollyanna. I am not an overly uber optimistic person who thinks everything's going to turn out all the time. But I do believe in mentally preparing myself, and that if I think something's going to fail, chances are it will. If I think it's going to succeed, chances are it will. Obviously, there are outside factors that can influence this, but in this controlled environment in the classroom with the time that you have to prepare, think about, visualize yourself walking up there confidently and succeeding. Don't think of all the things that can go wrong. Think of all the things that can go right. And then, as I mentioned, practice, practice, practice. 5 to 10 times, if not more, in front of a camera, in front of friends, in front of a mirror. The more you say it out loud, the more familiar you get with the content, the more you'll be able to recall in your brain where you need to go next. And it will build your confidence. And you already know the audience, you already know the setting. I just recently took a class on mindfulness, and it's a lot of what I do in yoga classes, but it's deep breathing, slow, controlled breathing. It can help to put your hand on the top of your chest and your hand on your belly, and just to feel your body reacting to the intake of breath and the exhalation of breath. It is isometric exercises. So if you watch sports, you might notice athletes before a game kind of like jumping up and down, shaking their hands out. That is them kind of jiggling out the nerves in their body. We get the blood flowing, we get the blood pumping. It diverts our attention, and then it makes us feel a little bit less stressed. I talked a little bit, maybe, I can't remember if I talked to this class or not, about power posing, doing these things, the Wonder Woman pose where you put your hands on your waist and kind of widen your stance. Doing those types of poses can help increase your confidence, increase your testosterone. And then just welcome some healthy anxiety. Anxiety has a bad reputation, and usually it is indicating a negative emotion. But having anxiety, having nervousness about public speaking is normal. It is a component of it, which is why most of us try to avoid it, because we don't like those negative, unpleasant emotions. But it does lessen and it does go away. And it just means that you're a human being, and it just means that you care about how others perceive you. I can't say that I can make it go away, but I want you to remember those things. And if you mess up, if you stumble over your words, if you forget point 2, if you don't say something exactly as you wanted to say it, just keep going. Chances are you're going to notice it more than your audience will. Don't call attention to it. Don't apologize profusely about it. Just keep going. Okay, we talked a little bit about some of these in class, and I think that's plenty of time for me to be talking, but I wanted to share those things with you about that section that I was able to cover in my other section of this course, but didn't get to in ours. So I hope that helps. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Take care.